I have a question, and it's actually a question that I spoke with Jonathan about, or he came up with the question initially, and we just talked about it briefly. But I would like to get like your kind of view on it. We are seeing so. On one hand, yes, digital is advancing, and we see a lot of people using digital solutions or DSP-based solutions, or even things that work in the box. So, plugins, like especially for bedroom players, plugins obviously are a very good alternative to having an amp and then having maybe some kind of load box or some kind of IR loader, and et cetera, pp. But tube amps in new shapes and forms are coming around, and we see some sort of, at least I see some kind of trend going towards like small wattage, high headroom amps with additional IR technology. Synergy's coming up with this. Friedman's coming up with this. Bad Cat is coming up with this. Ref obviously is doing it for a couple of years. But what we're not talking about is, I see that technicians, and you just brought an example of someone who was on the development side, but if we look at technicians, and especially technicians who know tube amp technology, are dying away. You know, they're going away.
Yeah.
They were going away very fast, and I don't see
Yes.
a whole new generation of technicians. So the question is, in like 20 years' time, who's going to be able to repair all that stuff if something's wrong? Well, I would like your take on that.
Okay. Honestly, the full generation of the tube fanatics is passing away.
Yeah.
And there is, how to describe it? It's an era in the technology that will never come back, because tubes are the components of the future, and the guys who learned how to design and repair tube circuitries, they are age 50, 60, 70. So the generation after them, they have no clue about tubes, because they went out of production in the 80s. The last tube designs were probably done in Russia in the 80s. And 90s, 2000s, no, this is 40 years ago. And who on earth is an engineer that wants to learn how this works? There will be only exceptions to that rule.
Okay.
And so that the good news about tube amps is, if you have a basic understanding of electronics, very basic, tube amps are the most basic designs ever. And if you don't know, you will feel, because 500 volts, they hurt. So you know this is the anode.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Don't touch this. I think the good thing about tube amps, especially if they're the vintage amps, which I totally understand, or not totally, but which I understand, is like, okay, there's your two system ACC, ECC 83 preamp tube, and there's whatever your 34 or 66 power amp tube. And once you've seen that, you know, okay, you need this resistor here and this capacitor there, and there's their filter, and this is, you can read and you can see the schematic on the board. Okay, the thing, what will happen with the tube amps is the contacts of the tube sockets, the potentiometers, and all this mechanical stuff will cause the problems, because I have a tube amp collection, and this is what I need my Dioxide 5 spray all the time, and then protect the thing with Vaseline so it doesn't reappear in 5 months again. So this is kind of what I can do, some fixing with, not really digging in deep. Then there comes the point where the capacitors will dry out.
Yes.
And then you have to have the guys who understand where and which one to change.
Yeah.
And
yes.
which one is actually the right capacitor to replace this one, not affecting the tone or maintaining the tone. Otherwise, there will be people that put in something like, oh, it needs to have 400 volts, and we put it in here, that's what I've got, but they don't know if that's changing anything.
Yeah.
And that kind of knowledge is now available in this generation of tube maintenance guys or designer guys, because they were interested in, hey, shall we have that mallard or shall we have that whatever RCA tube, and what's the difference of that mustard capacitor to an orange drop to blah blah blah.
But that's exactly that's why I'm asking, because I'm looking at guys like for example the guy I don't know if you know him. Do you know Psionic Audio?
I heard the name, but I don't know the guy.
So basically, the guy is, I think he's in Tennessee or somewhere, and he has a workshop where he repairs and maintains tube amps, and he is actually just filming, documenting the repairs that he's doing, and then uploading them to YouTube. And I recently, this guy's been around. This guy's been around for quite some time, but I recently discovered him when I was trying to go back into kind of like, I learned this initially, but I then forgot it. And since I made the way to pedals, I was like, cool, maybe I could wrap my head around this. And I'm listening to the guy, and I'm like, yeah, okay, A, this guy knows what he's doing. B, he definitely knows things on a component level. He knows what capacitors to put in and which capacitors not to put in. And on the way, he says, well, this type of Fender amp used to have certain things that were not working, or this, for example, when he was working on some kind of Dumble style amp, and he was like, what Alexander Dumble used to do, or what he was known for, he used to do this in the cathode follow-up stage, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And that kind of knowledge is what's going to be missing. We are going to have people with the basic understanding of how the circuitry works, but we're not going to have people with the kind of encyclopedia in their head that says, well, Fender amps from that era used to have, etc., etc., Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And therefore, I believe that the amount of real boutique amp designers will also shrink. I'm sure there will be some very, very few companies in 10 years that will still design some tube amps, but it's maybe, I don't know about a hi-fi business, maybe similar to them. I don't know how crazy they are and how big the market is. It's probably way smaller and therefore less attractive.
I think the hi-fi bunch is, it's even more niche, especially these days, because the ways people consume music is so different now. Back in the 80s, back in the 70s and 80s, like having a hi-fi system, a dedicated hi-fi system was everything. I remember my parents having one. I remember everybody who we knew had like this stack of things where you had like a double cassette deck, and you had the vinyl player, and you had the power amp and all these things, and then it went out to, but that was when people consumed music on vinyls and cassettes, on physical things that they wanted to own, because they also wanted to, you went into some guy's house and was like, look at this is my vinyl collection. And then you saw like 100,000 vinyls and you were like, whoa. Nowadays, people,
Spotify. This is the epitome of music, man.
Exactly. And nowadays it's like people are not interested in owning anything anymore, because it's out there on streaming platforms. It's available 24/7. It doesn't sound as good, and it doesn't give you the same experience. But then again, people consume different music in a different way these days. So that's why Yeah, the Hi-Fi Bunch. I think this sort of species is even smaller now. It's even more reduced. I don't see people going into a hi-fi store and spending 200 euros on a cable, to be honest.
Yeah, but on the other hand, these hi-fi guys were only the consumers, the listeners. And as a musician, you have to be a player that spends years in practicing to be worth buying a tube amp.
Yes.
And the hi-fi guys, they just had the money and showed the world like, oh, I'm so special. And this is Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon in the super special edition with my gold-plated cable for 300 whatever. And,
Thomas.
They're the same guys buying the Jens Ritter amplifier and guitars. It's the same guys, man.
Yeah, okay. With all these great smaragds or whatever it's called, the special stones.
Yeah, esmeralds and sapphires and whatnot. Yeah. So I have a great way for you to make more money, Thomas. You just, gold plate the amp one, and then you put like little expensive stones on the top of the potentiometers, and you can ask 30K for an amp. There you go.
That's where the tone is. That's where the tone is, dude.
Yeah, and then the next thing is I have a special holy water treatment.
Okay.
And I spray it on, and I put it next to my tube hi-fi and leave it. Massage it and shrink it into the metal, and then I can hear the holy smoke.
So you're selling the holy Wagyu meat of amps. This amp is only getting fed castañas.
Yeah, sure.
This brings me actually to the question you asked earlier, Frank, was actually, if you look on here, it was actually right there, future. I was going to ask the same damn question about like the technicians and the future and all that. And
I'm sorry.
You asked it. I was like, okay, cool. But this brings me to the other question, which is future proofing. So when we look at all the different products that came out throughout the years, like if we look at like 1950s to 60s, the technologies that were there were problem solvers for musicians. So if we look at the Beatles, right, they were playing the AC-15, not loud enough. They kicked it up to the AC-30, not loud enough. They went to the AC-50, not loud enough. AC-100. So they just kept bumping up the amplitude of these amplifiers. And then if you look at the Rivera, well, that's another problem solver. This one had effects loop, it had pentode and triode mode, all this like really fancy stuff, but guys were into rack gear into like the 1980s. And I don't want to like dish out all the different decades, but every single decade had trends and specific needs. So now we look at the 2020s, and it seems like everything is all over the place, right? So we have people that are making amplifiers that have the 2-notes technology already built in so that you can go to front of house. You have people that make a pedal, like a really small pedal that is basically like a preamp that you can send to the front of house. But it seems like we have more options today and more confusion with the musicians. And when I look at the Amp 1, it seems like you future-proofed the product. You made something that is going to work well for musicians in the studio, for live, and for home use. And it looks like you thought of a certain problem going forward. It wasn't just a thing that was a trend. Like if you remember like the lunchbox amps in the early 2000s, everybody was making those. Well, it looks like you made a product that wasn't going to cater to whatever was trendy at the time, but something that was going to be useful to people. So what was the inception of the Amp 1? What was the product that, not the product, but the problem that you saw coming that you wanted to solve with it?
Very simple. I have been on airplanes with a flight case with a 25 kilogram amplifier inside the flight case, tube amp.
No.
If you ever have done this, you know this is not a solution. You have a problem. And I was never happy with rental gear when I was playing somewhere. Flying to Hamburg which is North Germany, from Saarbrücken, it's option one is you drive by car, which is 7 hours drive. And if you have to do a fly gig, it's a cozy morning flight and next morning return. Yeah. And on that little flight, I take my guitar, and that's it. And I'm known to be the guy that kind of unscrews the neck of a Stratocaster and goes hand luggage all the way. So I don't even have. Oh, really? I only do carry-ons. So in that little bag that I have, I can get my Strat, I can get an Amp 1, I can get some clothes, and I'm good to go. I'm under every limit. That's why the Amp 1 still is the lightest 100 watt tube amp these days, because I was maxing out the stuff that I wanted, because I thought of air travel, and this is 1.2 kilograms and not, I mean, I could have a real heavy metal bottom plate, but it's too heavy.
Yeah, it's too heavy.
I didn't want to do that. So this is my fly rig, and it's the complete thing. So my idea was based on the suffering that I was facing traveling, and I knew that I am not the only one, because I have colleagues in other bands that have been at the same thing, and I could see that the whole industry is changing. I mean, around 2000 or in 1997, I was in Tic-Tac-Toe. There was my backliner that came to my living room that packed up everything, and I didn't touch the gear anymore. But the industry, the music industry, was kind of changing already, because the heydays with big money in the industry was gone. So where to save money? Well, probably on the hired musicians, because the boss of the band still wants to keep the income being the most important, and it's top down. So this guy gets the most, and the rest gets the rest.
Yeah,
and
true.
So I've been there, and I faced that as my reality, and of course that left some marks, because not only my hand with that heavy shit on the airport, it's mentally. This told me a story mentally, and therefore I thought, there's nothing wrong about my good old tube amps. I still have them here and blah, blah, blah. And they sound great, but I don't use them anymore. I actually don't use them for decades anymore. They're still sitting there, and I'm even recording with my Amp 1 now. I'm not missing anything. I'm torn. Do I like that Plexi better or my Amp 1 vintage channel? It's on that level.
Yeah.
It's like I need to have I'm not saying the Amp 1 is the best amp, no, but it's one of the best in my collection. And I have 3 Marshalls, and I would say the vintage channel is also in this territory. And it's like, and then it's so practical, I end up using the Amp 1, period. And the other reality that I see is when I kind of quit the big hired gun business that I've done, and I pay for everything myself. Traveling in the car, the first thing I wanted is a smaller cabinet, not 4x12 anymore. And this goes back to like 2000, where I tried to sneak out of that business. My 4x12s kind of retired, and I did my first replacement for that, which was based on a Mesa cabinet that was copied by by using Kettner, and then I was not happy with the whole thing, so I tweaked the whole thing till I was happy. Now
that was the
this
one.
is my
That was the one with the Thiele calculation, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
It's so the Mesa was still fucking heavy because it had a 12L speaker in there.
Yeah.
It was small and compact. So and back in the days, Matthias Jabs had a little relationship with using Kettner. He told the guys, get this cabinet, but with a different speaker, no problem. We've done that cabinet. I played that cabinet. I thought, oh, this is nice and small, but I didn't like that speaker too much, and I didn't like the cabinet all the way. I just like the form factor. So what I've done is I made it bigger. I changed the Thiele small parameters and the housing, because there's like a resonance inside the cabinet, and there is the extra low end you get from this. So, and I experimented very simple stuff, did a few versions, and that's became my Fat Cap, which I play for 20 years now. For 10 years with my own speaker, before that with Celestian speakers. But it's like it's all based on the same personal problems solving, my personal problems.